About those pharmaceutical numbers, we have a lot of them coming out. Tomorrow onwards, we have the big boys Lupin, Cipla, we have Sun Pharma next week, we have Cadila somewhere in the middle. So a lot to reckon with in the next couple of days. Anshuman Gupta, the research analyst at Investec, joins in on the show. He looks at the pharmaceutical and healthcare space. Anshuman, hi, thanks very much for joining in. If you can give us a brief in terms of what your expectations are for Lupin and Cipla tomorrow.
Yeah, hi. So I think overall, if you look at the sector, we think that year-on-year growth should be very strong for most of the guys. But the key here is to understand how US does, right? So starting with Lupin, we think they will deliver a muted year-on-year as well as quarter-on-quarter number. This is largely because of performance in the US. Some of the large products that they have in the US are already facing competition. So that will pull down numbers. Secondly, their whole specialty initiative, we will see expenses related to those specialty initiatives feature for the first time in this quarter. So that could also depress earnings. So overall, I think we expect a weak set of numbers. We do expect that Street will downgrade earnings post Lupin's first quarter. On Cipla, the other company which reports, again, a very good set of numbers, both on a year-on-year as well as quarter-on-quarter basis. This is largely because of a very strong India franchise. Seasonally as well, India will be strong from versus Q4. So margin expansion, decent PAT growth. We also expect that US will pick up a little bit from here, given that they have got quite a few decent launches over the last 6 months or so.
Out of the entire pack, I mean, this common sort of point of conversation, Anshuman, has been that you should look at companies serving India rather than companies dependent wholly on the US or in a large way dependent on the US. Do you broadly agree with that thesis?
So we really do not cover India-centric names right now. Most of our initiation has been on US-centric names. But just to answer your question, we do really like the India business. There is no doubt about that. But we would like companies where there is a mix of India and US, because US is still the most attractive market in the world. So we do continue to like US as a market. In the near term, clearly because of high competitive intensity, we will see some pain. But on a longer term basis, companies who do well in the US will show significantly higher earnings growth versus companies which do well only in India.
Okay. Anshuman, what's your sense in terms of pricing pressure? There are a lot of global companies that have reported numbers as well. That along with the fact that, a couple such as Torrent Pharma has said that, pricing pressure is probably coming back to traditional levels. We've heard some positive comments incrementally from some other companies as well. As a whole, what are you expecting with regards to that, especially from these key companies, Lupin, Cipla, etc.?
So our take on price erosion really is a little different than the Street. Firstly, because of the fact that what is important to understand is that price erosion is not an industry phenomenon in the sense that it is very product specific, it is very company specific. So it is largely driven by competitive intensity. So I really, it's difficult for us to really say that, that two price erosion numbers given by companies are different, or same or different, right? It's very difficult because of the way they measure price erosion. I think there's a lot of confusion around price erosion as a term. So maybe the price erosion levels are coming down, but for Indian pharma per se, I think the critical element of the story is how large products behave. When I say that, I mean Indian companies have spent a lot on pipeline. If the pipeline doesn't deliver, I think it will be more difficult even if price erosion gets a little better. So from a longer term perspective, competitive intensity lowering competitive intensity will mean that price erosion will get better surely. But in the near term, next 2-3 years, I think the delivery on large products is more critical than just price erosion.
Anshuman, do you believe that if one were to buy a pharma fund type of, basically a bunch of stocks, hang in there for the next 2 years, 2 years plus, One can, it would be a thing to do or no? What would your sense be? Or you think it means the opportunities are far and few in between? I'm looking at your ratings. You've got Aurobindo, you rate Aurobindo as a buy and Cipla as a buy. Everything else is a sell or a hold.
Right. So from a 2-3 year perspective, I think the challenges will continue. If you look at our target multiples as well as target prices, they clearly suggest that they are actually a reflection of the ongoing challenges in the industry. So at least for the next 2 to 3 years, it will be difficult to buy pharma as a pack. I would assume that there will be recovery in pharma companies eventually, but recovery will not be broad-based. It will be very, very company-specific, and it will all depend on how companies evolve in terms of their pipeline as well as their strategy on specialty. So in the near term, in fact, there could be a lot of investments which will go in building a pipeline for the future, which will depress return ratios as well as I think earnings growth will not come through. We are still looking at earnings downgrade for most of the companies. However, in the sector, we like Cipla and Aurobindo. Cipla, clearly, it's a very good mix of a very strong India franchise as well as a growing US business. We like Aurobindo because of the good execution that they have done in the last 3 years. If you look at the last 3 years when nobody was growing in the US, they are the only companies to grow. They have achieved this through a very basic generic model focused on, efficiency of operations as well as a very, say, broad-based pipeline. So there are opportunities to pick, but I think from a entire pharma pack perspective, we still think that recovery is some time away.
Okay, all right, Anshuman, we're going to leave it on that note. Thanks very much for joining in and speaking with us. So that's the view coming in on the fundamentals of the pharmaceutical space.